All right, now, we're going to get into some blues harmonica today. Blues, rock, power harp, as it were. We'll cover some territory. The blues has been around a long time, and I think it's one of our nation's greatest contributions to the musical history. If it goes down in the books as to what music came out of this country, I think blues is it. Started back in the days of the black slaves being brought into this nation. Down in the South in the plantations and cotton fields. They were chanting, they were getting out there doing their work, and singing was a way of releasing. As the black people moved into their churches, they turned those incantations and those chants and those sing-song things that they did into songs of rejoicing, songs of pain, songs of sorrow. And eventually those things got turned into folk songs, gospel songs, minstrel songs, and down through the years evolved into the blues. Blues, as it came together, influenced other things: country music, jazz, rhythm and blues, and the rock and roll that we hear today is all derived from what we knew as the blues. There's recordings from as early as the turn of the century that are basically built around blues structures. And I think it's a great contribution to music. And the harmonica was there the whole time. The harp was right in the pocket. Being part of it was guitars, it was harmonica. A lot of times it was just singing, but it was guitars, harmonicas, and other little instruments that popped up here and there. We're going to cover a lot of territory today. Acoustic style blues, of course amplified blues. I'll get into mic technique, different types of mics that are good for playing these styles. We'll get into using of amplifiers and how to avoid feedback and stuff like that. We'll get into how to play with other people and some of the what I call sort of etiquette of performance. Harmonica players tend to have a bad reputation, feeding back, not knowing when to quit, stuff like that. I want to touch base on some of that stuff because it's important as you get into playing the harp. Of course, some of you cats out there have already been playing and are already on stage. You can ignore that part if you want. But for a lot of guys that are just getting into playing this kind of stuff, manners have a lot to do with whether you're allowed to get up and play with people. And so we're going to, and I'm going to get into doing some scales. I'm going to get into playing some tunes. We're going to just have a whole lot of fun here. The blues is a great style. Preferably, you've already gotten into my first videotape, which is harmonica architecture. In that tape, I covered some real basics of how to play the harmonica. And even for those of you who have been playing for some time, there's some techniques in breathing, techniques in rhythm, how to play single notes, how to bend notes, what notes can be bent, how far, some scales, some chords, some exercises that can help you get off the ground and on a good foot for the beginners and get rid of some bad habits maybe for people that have been playing a while. Right now we're going to talk about how to bend the harmonica. I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about how to bend the notes. How far can they be bent? Which ones can be bent? We're going to start at the bottom of the harp and go up. Some of them are bent on the draw, on the inhale. Some of them are bent on the higher part of the harmonica, on the exhale, on the blow. I'm going to start with hole number one. Hole number one can be bent a half step on the inhale. Hole number two can be bent either a half step or a whole step. 3 can be bent a half step, a whole step, or a step and a half. Hole number 4 can be bent a half step again. Hole number 5, sort of a half step. Hole number 6 can be bent, once again on the draw, a half step. Hole number 7 on the blow can be bent a half step. Sort of a half step. Hole number 8, a half step. Hole number 9, a half step. This once again on the blow. Hole number 10 can be bent a half step or a whole step. Those are the holes and how far they can be bent, what notes you can get. If you look in the book, you'll see what the names of those notes are. I'm doing this on a C harmonica. The technique I use, I touched base with it on my previous tape. The technique I use, my best description of the technique for getting bent notes is describing if you have a nice thick milkshake, preferably a strawberry milkshake with big chunks in it, you know, and you're trying to pull it up through the straw. You get that, you know, you're pulling so hard that you're collapsing the straw. I mean, you got that chunk of strawberry stuck in the straw and you're trying to, the back of your tongue is going to go to the top of your mouth. You don't want to let your tongue leave the harp if you're playing with your tongue, the curled tongue method, as I've showed in the earlier tape. You want the tongue to stay on the harp. If you're playing in the pucker up and blow, then that's not as important, but the idea of your tongue going up to the back of your mouth, kind of a, that's the kind of thing you want to get going. If you got your tongue on the harp, like I say, think about that thick milkshake that you're trying to get to come up through the straw. That's the best method I can show. On the blow, it's a very similar method, except you're blowing it out. And if you actually put your hand in front of your mouth here, you'll feel the air going from a straightforward thing to a downward thing. So you want to use that on the top notes. That's bending the harp. We're going to move on now into playing octaves, which is another method, another technique which is used a lot in blues. What you're doing when you're playing octaves is you're actually playing two notes that are the same note but an octave apart. The way to do this, on the harp, those notes, let's say if you're to play a C on a C harmonica in an octave, you want to play hole number 1 and hole number 4. Well, how the heck do I do that? Well, what you want to do is you want to put your tongue up against your palate, right behind your teeth. You have to narrow it enough so that you're only blocking, you're letting the back of your tongue, the bottom of your tongue, rest against holes number 2 and 3. You're only letting your mouth cover holes number 1 through 4, and therefore you're playing only 1 and 4. If I want to move up to 2 and 5, 3 and 6, 4 and 7. Inhale on 1 and 4. Now where the octaves get used are, especially when you're doing rhythm harmonica, if you're playing some chords and you can't find, if you're playing a rhythm thing and the band goes to a chord like the 5 chord or maybe a 2 chord, you can't hit that chord. You can hit the 1 and the 4, no problem. You can hit the G chord, that's inhaling. You can hit the C chord, that's the 4 chord, blowing. But to get to the 5 chord, instead of trying to get a chord, you can't really get it. You can hit an octave, inhaling on 1 and 4, and get this, which is D, which is the 5 chord. So you got. If you got to go to the 2 chord, which is an E, oftentimes the E or E minor, it gets hit as a 2 chord. You might go to that as an octave in a progression. So I tend to like a lot of rhythm harmonica, and octaves come in handy. Now we talked about in the previous tape also rhythm harmonica. One of the foremost guys that I would say in terms of blues that I learned rhythm harmonica from is Sonny Terry, the late Sonny Terry. He had a style of him, and he had a duet with Brownie McGee, which is a great duet. And in that they did a style of country blues which involved both of them, since there were only 2 of them playing off each other. I have a duet with a guitar player named Roy Rogers, and the 2 of us do a similar kind of interaction. But Sonny Terry was great at playing rhythm behind the vocal and rhythm behind the guitar. And it's a style of harp playing that I think is great in blues. Now for those of you who want to play rock out, want to dig into the amplifier, you still might want to pay attention to this, because there's times, especially when you're playing in a band, and if it's a small band, you've only got a guitar player, you don't have anybody else, there's times when the guitar player is playing a solo where it might be nice to chunk along on some rhythm. So you can do this even on the amplifier. I'll get into that a little later, but for right now I'm going to touch base on some rhythmic type harmonica. As you can see, you can get going. You don't even need a guitar player. You can get going on a harmonica. If you're playing by yourself and you're playing, you can do a lot of rhythmic stuff. Now what I'm doing there, I'm playing a lot of rhythmic stuff. I'm just blowing in and out, primarily in the bottom part of the harp. I'm grabbing holes number 1 through 4, and I'm stuff like that. Just playing along on a rhythm, and then once in a while hitting the octave. I'm just playing a rhythm with my mouth. Once again, I'm going to go back to tape number 1, harmonica architecture. There's a whole lot of rhythm exercises in there, in which I lay out some words, and they're in the book, that'll run you through a bunch of things you can do. You can come up with your own. It's like a cadence. Think of a drum beat. Think of a groove. So you get a groove going, you get something pumping, and you intermix it with some bent notes. I'm just bending that two whole. I'm bending it a whole step. I'm going. So see, what I'm doing when I slow it down isn't so tricky. It's just a matter of getting a rhythm going. I'm only bending two notes. Until you get those muscles built up to where you can hit those with some power, you might have trouble doing this, but you can still do the rhythm thing. You can get into playing rhythm harp even before you get into playing good bent notes and stuff like that. Now, I want to go and get into what the heck can we do with these bent notes once we got them. I showed you what notes you can bend. I'm going to give you an example of a blues progression that involves a lot of bent notes. There's a lot of players that I've checked out that can play good blues. They can bend notes. But what they're not getting, they can bend hole number 2 a whole step. But they can't get hole number 2 bent a half step. And you got to train your muscle to get that thing in a half step. I mean, my muscles in here are going through 2 different stages. I'm dropping my jaw down just a little more for that third note. And so there's a one in between, and if you can get that, you can use that note. It takes time to develop that note and give it tone, but you need to give it a little more power. Remember, in breathing, we're bringing the air from the stars all the way down to our feet. When we're sending it out, we're sending it from our feet right back to the stars. Whether we're playing hard or soft, whether we're playing loud or quiet. So you can get that note in between, or you can glide all the way down, and that's blues. Now that hole number 3, like I say, it's got 4 notes you can get, all on the inhale. Nice overtone. You want to be able to get it to where you can go to any one of those notes.